special webinar for today on the tourism in the COVID-19 era, discussing both crises and opportunities in this very unique, perhaps once in a lifetime experience for those of us working in the tourism sector. And in that session, we'll divide the session into two parts. On the first part, the part of the crisis, we'll try to look at the crisis life cycle, understanding the four major stages and some of the key components within the stages that affects our life today in the tourism industry with regard to COVID-19 pandemic. And the second part, the part of opportunity, we'll have a quick pick at 7 key opportunities that are being offered to destinations if they wish not only to stay within the present, but also take active steps and walk towards the future. So this will be our session for the day. As there are quite many of us, I will be not taking questions in this open forum, but if you have a question, you're more than welcome to share it on the chat. And Guy from our staff will be leading the chat, and he might be able to answer some of your questions, or also to share a question, some of the question with me in case it will be required. So to quickly introduce myself, I have two hats. I have a doctorate in tourism marketing. I've been studying tourism marketing and particularly tourism crisis for about 15 years now, and also gained a lot of experience working in the industry. I have served as a marketing advisor for the Israeli Ministry of Tourism for 3 years, and gained a lot of experience working with tourism organizations worldwide. And I know we have people here today from these organizations, from Philippines Tourism Promotion Board, and Uzbekistan Tourism, in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, and other tourism organizations throughout the world that are here today to really understand how the world is changing and how we should proact toward these changes. So if we go back in time about half a year from today till in the conclusion of 2019, so 2019 was a very good year for the tourism industry, for global tourism. And in 2019, we concluded 10 years of consecutive growth. Tourism has been steadily growing since 2008, since 2010. The 2008 was the economic collapse of 2008. And so tourism has been growing for 10 years in a row, average growth rates of about 4%. And we have turned from an industry of less than 1 billion tourists. In the year 2020, we're supposed to reach the milestone of 1.5 billion global tourists. And of course, that doesn't include domestic tourists. So things were very bright, very promising back in the end of 2019. Of course, the picture has changed since, but we're still in the positive phase. We're still in the phase of the growth, the pre-crisis phase. If we're looking particularly at Sub-Saharan Africa, so in this period, tourism to Sub-Saharan Africa grew from around 30 million tourists, international tourists, in the year 2010 to around 45 million tourists in the year 2019. That's 50% growth for all countries in the region. Some countries have recorded more than that during this period. And the tourism business gained a lot of positive attention these years. Not only positive, but a lot of positive attention. Also, it drew a lot of investment. So it became very, very, very trendy in recent years to open the tourism business, a business resulting from the consecutive growth we had on the sector. So that's on the positive side. And on the negative side, and there's always a negative side, the way tourism was managed led to increasing pressures on the natural environment, on the social environment, on the economic environment. We saw some places that were talking about issues of over tourism, about not having the right capacity to handle all the tourists, to talk about damages to the natural environment. And we also started to see some voices that calling to limit tourism. So this was the picture in 2019, prior to the crisis. In early 2020, from this 10 years positive momentum, things have changed dramatically and quite rapidly, with the spread of COVID-19 pandemic turning into pandemic in March 2020. And we're now, and this is data from today, we are now seeing a global pandemic that has infected more than 15 million people and have taken the life of at least 600,000 people, and spread it to over 180 countries worldwide. So this is really a global pandemic that's changing the life of all of us, but it's not just changing our life, but also changing tourism. During the months of March, April, and May, more than 100 tourism destinations around the world have been under lockdown, with significant limitations with regard to border control. Some countries going into complete lockdown, shutting down airports and closing down the borders. So this obviously has a major effect on tourism as well. And we've seen it on both sides, both with regard to demand. So demand has went down very, very drastically. Data by the International Aviation Association indicate of more than 90% decline in commercial aviation during the months of April and May 2020. So perhaps some planes are flying, but they are all completely empty. So that's on the demand side. People were either under lockdown or prefer to stay at home. And also this affects the supply side. And if we talk about tourism destination, tourism organization, governments, local economies, hoteliers, entrepreneurs, employees, so that's creating a huge effect worldwide. We see some economies that are less affected, economies where tourism is only 3, 4, 5% of GDP, and we see other economies that tourism is a significant part of GDP, that tourism could get to 20 or 30%, sometimes even more of the GDP. And then we see that economies literally are walking towards collapse, resulting from the halt of tourism, of international tourism. And we need to remember that following this decade of growth, we had a lot of investment in the sector, and a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs working in the sectors have taken serious loans in order to further enlarge their supply, to open new hotels, to buy new facilities, new buses, new boats, new airplanes, whatever. And now, after they have taken the loans, they've used the money. So we're not sure when and if they will be able to return this loan. So this is quite of a serious challenge for those who use significant leverage post in this growth period, especially in early 2020, in the first Q1 of this year. So we're now slowly in baby steps moving to the third stage of this crisis. So we had an increase in tourism and then a sharp decline with the crisis, and now we're slowly starting to emerge out, hopefully not stepping into a second wave of COVID-19. Some countries show statistics on second wave. We hope that these cases will be contained quickly and effectively, and we'll be able to take these baby steps and step out of this crisis. And we're seeing travel restriction to be lifted. We're seeing tourism organizations that start to re-promote tourism. We see entrepreneurs that, and hoteliers and tourism businesses that are reopening the doors for tourists, and we see how very, very, very slowly, very carefully, the business starts to run again. People are still very concerned both with health issues and also with economic issues. We're quite positive to think that we have not yet seen the full economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're still facing some negative news on these aspects. So people are very careful with both with their health, but also with how they're spending their money. And of course, there is a fear of a second wave coming, maybe in the fall, maybe before the fall. And in the stage of adapting, also the supply side, destinations learn to adopt, and there is something that we refer to as the new normal, about wearing face masks and gloves, about practicing hygiene and sanitation, about social distancing, about managing tourism businesses without buffets and without hundreds of people jumping in the pool or going in crowded market. And there's actually, to my opinion, something said about it, that I kind of miss the good old fun that we used to have in last year. And we really have to adopt a situation where things are different than the way we used to manage. We used to run them before the COVID-19 pandemic, before this new normality. And we see that how people are getting into this situation. We see people start with staycations, staying home and going to start exploring tourist attractions that's close to their home, and slowly going on domestic tourism, taking their car and driving 1 or 2 hours away to the mountains for a little Airbnb or a little village to enjoy some time in the countryside. And slowly from that, we're going to international tourism. I just got updated numbers from Greece that in the first 2 weeks of July 2020, of this July, so Greece has tourism numbers that are equivalent to some 20% of the same share that Greece have in 2019. So about 4 out of 5 tourists decided not to come this year, either to stay home or to travel within their country. But every time we refer to 2019 as a reference point, we need to remember that 2019 is not relevant anymore. And we can kind of keep it as an old memory, but things are turning in a very different way this time. So these are the things that happened till this point. From this point onward, we have to ask ourselves where we want to go. Till this point, we have been led by the crisis, but now it's the time to take the lead. Now is the time to proactively ask ourselves, ask our local community, ask the entrepreneurs, ask the organization, the stakeholders, the governments, where do we want to go? How do we want to, what kind of future we want to create, and how we want to create this future for our destination, for our organization. So this is the first part that summarizes some of the challenges that we're seeing, and maybe give a quick bottom line to the crisis that we're having now. Guy, is there anything that you want to share with us from the chat? Maybe one or two questions?
No, till now, not.
Okay, perfect. So we go into the second stage, and that's from looking at what's happening in the near past or today to looking at the future, or maybe asking ourselves, what is the future holding for us, or what we want the future, what we want the future to be, and how we're definitely in a turning point, we're definitely restarting tourism, but where we want this restart to take us. That's a good question we should be asking ourselves. And I want to propose for today 7 different directions, or 7 different points a destination, entrepreneur, a business should consider when asking yourself, how do I proceed from now on? Where do I want to go? How do I want to lead from what we're having here? So first of all, the value proposition that we used to offer in the days before COVID-19 is not necessarily relevant anymore. And we have to think what tourist wants now. Some of the things that they want include a restorative experience after spending time in lockdown, being very stressed. People like to relax, to have a very peaceful time, to feel how they go back to their serenity. So that's one thing that we see consumers repeating in consumer surveys. We see how outdoor experiences overtake urban experiences. So more and more people interested to go in the countryside and to spend time on the beach, and less people are interested to go into crowded markets or to lively downtowns that are crowded with people. Thirdly, we see tourists want to spend time with their beloved ones. People want to spend time with their families. They're less interested to travel by themselves, solo travelers. They want to spend time with the people that they weren't able to see during lockdown, or people that they spent lockdown with, and now they want to spend time with them outside of their home. So these are some of the 3 major changes we see in what tourists want as value, as an experience. A second thing we note, and this is generally, is that the coronavirus pandemic has been an accelerator for changing processes that we have been seeing around the world. One of them has to be with digitization. People have been locked at home for several weeks, some of them for a few months, and they learn to rely more and more on digital and on mobile devices. If in 2019 only 50% of travel products of outbound travel from Europe were ordered online, we're quite significant to think that in 2021 this would be much higher. And we would see these changes both in the pre-travel stage, where people will be ordering more and doing more research and getting more inspiration, so more things will go digital. And also during the trip, and we're talking about smart destinations and smart tourism, and the use of digital devices to provide safe, safe COVID-19 wise, experiences in the destination that doesn't require us to have face-to-face interaction, which is currently something that people are trying to avoid. A third thing is tourist experience. In this turning point, it is now a critical time for destinations to rethink their value proposition. Not only in the way that we've mentioned already that consumer tastes and preferences are changing, but also in the way that what kind of value we are offering. Is this value what people are looking for? Is this value is what people would be willing to pay for? We're now marching into red ocean where there's going to be a lot of supply. Demand is still very, very limited. Many destinations, many tourism providers are competing over the tourist, and we really have to fine-tune a value proposition to think how we create a very meaningful and unique experience. What do we mean by that? We mean experience that would engage the senses, that would make us emotionally engage with our hearts, that would turn us into active participants in the experience, that we would have some kind of once in a lifetime unique experience that we will be shaping together with the business owner in the destination. We're talking about an experience that would engage us cognitively, would make us to think about things differently, and also to affect how we see the world, that we would relate to the world in a different way, that it would be some kind of an experience that things would not be the same after we experienced it. So these are 5 key layers in redeveloping the tourist experience and redeveloping how we make the visitor stay with us meaningful, memorable, unique, and also shareable. Some of the business models that we have been following, or tourism businesses have been following for 10, for 20, for 30 years, might be non-relevant at the moment. Some of them might be not relevant during the coming year until the next summer. Some of them maybe have changed forever. And we have to re-question the business models we have been seeing by asking ourselves 3 fundamental questions. First, what kind of customers or consumers are accessible to us at the moment? Domestic tourism, staycations, business people, whatever, that's first. Second, which resources do we have? And 3, when the resources and the consumer meet, what kind of value proposition we can offer for these people. And I see around me a lot of innovation on business development and business models. I see tourism organizations that are shifting rapidly from international tourism to domestic tourism. I see hotels that are looking at staycations, at people that are living 5 or 10 minutes or 20 minutes from that hotel, offering them day use, or business people that are coming, that are working from home and want to change a little bit their working place, or looking for a quiet place to work without the children hassling in the back. So they are coming to use hotels, and I see all kind of creative models. I've recently seen a museum that started to create, to host small weddings in its one of its pavilions, because it's really about asking yourself, what kind of business model I can develop for now. And it doesn't necessarily have to rely on the business model that was right for me yesterday. We have to, on the part of restarting tourism, it's really about conducting a mind shift, restarting the way we think about our business model, trying to think from scratch. If we would open our business today, if today would be the first day we would be stepping into our office, how we would design our value proposition, our business model, based on what's happening right now, not about what happened yesterday. Yesterday is not relevant anymore. The world has changed. We're now in a turning point. I know that many of the people are in the audience today are working for tourism board, for national tourism board, for regional, for domestic tourism board, for tourism organizations. And we need to remember that in most cases, innovation and the creation of new value doesn't come from the public sector, but it comes from the private sectors. It comes from entrepreneurs who seize a new opportunity and are willing to take the risk and step out of the comfort zone and engage within this opportunity. And as a public sector, we need to ask ourselves two questions. First of all, how do we minimize the interference, how we are not standing in the way of this entrepreneur, looking where there is, asking yourself maybe where there is overregulation, or how we can not interfere the new business processes that's happening. And secondly, how we can encourage and support entrepreneurs who are expected to take risk at these very turbulent, very stormy times. And now how we can help them, maybe with training, maybe with financing, maybe with governmental support, or with any aid we can think of, because these are the people who will take your destination, your next step. These are the people who would lead the innovation, and we need to make sure that we're supporting them. When we talked about the major growth we experienced in tourism in the last decade, so also the issue of sustainability and carrying capacity and over-tourism and overuse of resources was a major part of it. And we're now experiencing a once-in-a-lifetime pause that might be an opportunity to get tourism on the right track. Because in the last decade, together with the growth of international tourism, we've also seen how tourism has been turned, in some cases, into a negative force, a force that drives people out of their home, a force that creates major economic changes, a force that damage the natural environment, a force that damaging the local population. And we want to ask ourselves how we can get tourism on the right track to make it a positive force, and how we can enhance sustainability efforts. And when we're talking about sustainability, we have to be very, very careful from just using sustainability as an empty buzzword, about using sustainability practices that are very day-to-day, very simple, very understandable on the grassroots level, on the entrepreneur level, and can help tourism to develop the way we want it to develop. Now, if we're talking opportunity, we're already seeing tourism cities such as Amsterdam and Lisbon and Budapest that in the last months were changing the regulation. This is just an example regarding Airbnb, because they understand that we have now this unique opportunity to put tourism on the right track, and this opportunity with regard to sustainability is relevant to everyone in this audience today. So we have now many destinations worldwide who miss their tourists, and at the same time, we have very limited demand. And that caused a red ocean and a huge competition between destinations. And the marketing messages that we used yesterday are not necessarily relevant for today. And we have to reframe our marketing messages. Here we can see a screenshot of a video campaign for Turkey that was just launched about 2 weeks ago. And it's very interesting to see how they put hygiene and safety and COVID-19 readiness really in the forefront of the campaign. But even the simple things that marketing messages of pre-COVID-19 included, people experiencing authenticity and walking the local market. And now what we're seeing in marketing campaigns, people walking into deserted beaches where they are the only person on the beach, and this is considered to be a desirable thing. And we have to understand that as consumer values change, and they have changed in the last half a year, in the first half of 2020, so marketing messages have to change accordingly. Also, when we're talking about marketing channels, so people are spending significantly more time on their mobile devices, on social networks, and if we're not spending the vast majority of our marketing budget there in social media, on mobile devices, so we should seriously ask ourselves, maybe it's time not only to rethink tourism, but also to rethink marketing, communication, marketing messages, and marketing channels. Lastly, our last and 8th point is regarding the future, has to do with resilience and agility. The COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis, and we're now experiencing this crisis, and hopefully soon we'll be crossing safely to the other side. But I don't think that this is the last crisis we're going to see in this lifetime. We still have major issues that relate to global warming. We see a growing number of incidents that had to do with global warming. We see a lot of fast changes and slow changes with regard to it. And that's going to cause major disturbances in the way we'll manage tourism in the post-COVID-19 era. So instead of thinking about the COVID-19 as a one-time crisis, we have to think about how we're going to be working in an environment that's going to require us to be very agile and to work under constant crisis that's going to be developing and coming and going and changing. And we have, when we're rethinking our destination, when we're rethinking a value proposition, we have to think about resilience, about how to develop a system that could successfully absorb changes, that could successfully absorb crisis, maintain its functionality, and keep on growing despite the frequent changes that we're seeing today, that we're expecting to see in the future. We have to remember that we're in an era of constant changes. The COVID-19 is not a one-time changes, but it's a part of a series of changes, and we have to redesign what we're doing in a resilient and agile manner in order to make sure that we're always ahead of the next change. So to conclude, we have been led by the COVID-19 crisis. Now it's time to act proactively, and from being led, to take the lead and ask yourself for our destinations where we want to be tomorrow. How we can use this crisis as an opportunity, as a turning point to take tourism where it should be, to take tourism where we want it to be, to redesign our destinations, our marketing, our value proposition, our sustainability plan, to become a better destination, a more successful destination, definitely a different destination than we've seen before. When we develop this future, so this future should not relate to 2019 as a reference point. 2019 has gone out of the window. Sorry to say that. We're starting from scratch, from ground zero, and from here, we're thinking how to build from today the best, most successful, most sustainable, most exciting, most experienceable, most engaging tourism destination we can be, how we use this present as a ground zero to build a foundation for a successful tomorrow. Thank you very much. I wish to share with you that this session that we had today is an opening session for a series of webinars that's going to be part of training by the Galilee International Management Institute. This training will start in a few weeks from today. Jimmy would send you more details regarding registration. I'm thankful for having all of you with me today. I'm thankful for your time, thankful for your listening, and I'll be really looking forward to see each and every one of you with us in this course that will start in the coming weeks, together with the Galilee International Management Institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, just from the Galilee Institute. Thank you for joining. It was super interesting to hear you, Eran, and we will present to you more materials about the ongoing course that will be run by Eran. So I hope to see you with us soon in the online arena, and it was a pleasure to host you.